Okay. I appreciate everyone that has come in and joined with us this afternoon. And just as an initial reminder for everyone, this presentation is being recorded and it will be made available on our website and also on YouTube. So you're all going to be YouTube stars. A couple housekeeping items is just remember to mute when you're not talking. That just makes it so that the quality of this is as high as possible so that we can reference this in the future. So why are we here? Let's address that real quick. As many of you probably are well aware, we recently published the proposed determination for the Mill Creek Subdivision, and part of our process is to hold a public meeting. And we're holding it in this unique way due to the year-long pandemic we've had, and thank goodness we seem to be coming out of that, and this may be one of the last that we strictly do online only. We had to pull the trigger on this one a little early back in April, and so that's why we're doing it here. We'll probably look to get out and meet people face to face here in the near future. So quickly, as far as introductions, my name is Michael Drake. I'm the Assistant State Engineer over Adjudication. And with us today from the state are a few other staff members. Gary Brinley is on the meeting, and Nick is also on the meeting. He's the team lead over this area. And then Sarah Schechter is from the Attorney General's office, and she's working on adjudication and works very closely with us. And so those are some of the key individuals that on the state side. And we appreciate each and every one of you joining us today, and we'll just go ahead and move on. Let's just address questions real quick. Since this is a pretty small group, feel free to chime in if you have a question. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little hand, and that's a raise hand function. And I'll assign Gary to kind of watch that and stop me if if I don't see it, because I'll be looking through the presentation and my notes, and so I might miss it. And so Gary can go ahead and stop me, and we can take some questions. And we'll definitely provide a very, as long of a period as we need at the end to answer any and all questions. And so if your question is more general and not necessarily about the process and the presentation we're going through, that would be an appropriate time to do that. But if you got a question that's just, just burning in your soul, then by all means, raise that little hand and answer it, or you can certainly just unmute and interrupt me too. I'm fine with that. Okay, so moving on here. This is just a little electronic meeting statement. It's almost more for future reference as to why we held it this way and not in person. And so that will just be up there. Thank goodness we're moving away from this, and we can start to move on with life. Okay, so as far as agenda, we are going to review the adjudication process quickly. We covered this in the past, and my predecessor talked about it, and so we'll review it and talk about where we are in the process and what happens in the future. We'll go over the proposed determination that's been published, and hopefully you've all had a chance to get your hands onto it. There are a couple unique aspects of in this Mill Creek PD because of the unique nature of the 1913 Mill Creek Decree, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll talk about the hydrographic survey maps, and we'll talk about how to access it. Hopefully you guys have already crossed that bridge, but again, for reference for those that look at this presentation later, we will cover how to get your hands on the proposed determination and the hydrographic survey maps. And then, as I noted, we'll take questions at the end. Okay, so this is the adjudication process. And you can see when I push this next button, you'll see the various dates that we've already passed through fill in. This adjudication, and it originally started with a petition back in 1944, very long-running adjudication. And we recently picked up this specific area and gave notice and summons in November of 2017. We held a public meeting, an initial public meeting in 2017, and a notice to file claims went out in December of 2017. In May of the following year, we published the list of unclaimed rights, and there was a 90-day period to object, and that passed. And then we held another public meeting about that list of unclaimed rights. And then there was an objection. There were various objections to the list of unclaimed rights, which were resolved, and a decree was issued. Final summons went out, and since those public meetings in 2018, we've been working hard, evaluating the claims, and working towards what was ultimately published in May of this year, the proposed determination. So what will happen from here on out? Well, from May 19th, there are 90 days to object to the proposed determination. If there's something we missed, if we messed up on something, an error, if you don't agree, that's okay. That's why this process exists. So please file an objection. This is how we refine what we have and make sure that it is the most accurate document that we can. And so that is coming up on the 17th. And then number 14 in the process is the public meeting, which we're holding today. Once we work through all of the objections that come from this proposed determination, we'll ultimately, the final crowning achievement is a decree on this proposed determination. And so that's kind of where we are and what we're working on, what will follow from May 19th, when this proposed determination was published. So hopefully that brings you up to speed with where we are and what is coming. We'll go ahead and move on. All right, so diving into the proposed determination. These are some of the these are the contents of a proposed determination. And what you'll find first is the title page. And this includes some important information that you'll need, particularly if you're going to file an objection. First off, it references the district court. And this is the court that has jurisdiction. It references the adjudication, and very importantly, the case number. The objection needs to be filed against this civil number. And it references the hydrologic division and the subdivision name, and then finally the area, book, and numbers. So 57 book 15 is what the Mill Creek proposed determination is. Next page is the notice to water users, and this contains even more information. Some of it's the same. We have the case number again, and the judge, Laura Scott, and then we have very detailed instructions on filing an objection. And so if you wish to object to the proposed determination, this is how you would do it. All right, and the next section is the preamble. And this section describes in greater detail some of the assumptions and different things that the state engineer's office went through to prepare this proposed determination. And I won't go through it in detail piece by piece, but we are going to address one specific part of this, and that's because of this unique nature of this proposed determination having many rights that were described in the 1913 Mill Creek Decree. So hopefully you've read this section. This is, if you have one of those rights, then this is a very important section to you. What this section does is it identifies the class structure and describes how distribution is going to be accomplished. As you guys are probably well aware, the 1913 decree established a class system, but it's been a long time since that decree was entered, and a lot of things have changed since then. And as we work through the various rights from the Mill Creek decree, there were several rights that were no longer in use and were forfeited, listed as forfeited in our proposed determination. That necessarily changed some of the assumptions that were in place when the 1913 Mill Creek Decree was put in place. Chief among them are the flow stages. If you're familiar with the decree, it defines various flow stages, CFS flow rates of the creek that would define when you go from primary to second class or surplus rights. Given that there were so many rights that were forfeited, those flow stages really didn't make any sense anymore. And so what we've established here is a little bit more of a freewheeling structure, I guess, that is flexible and doesn't have those defined flow stages anymore, if that makes sense. So in short, the preamble just describes that the distribution should proceed along the class structure, satisfying each class in turn fully before the next one comes into priority. So for example, the first class we have listed here is the house use rights. So there are some rights that are based on this. And as established in the decree, those rights kind of existed above and first in place before the primary, second class, and surplus rights. And so we've tried to honor that establishment and bring that structure into this. Next is the primary rights, and water is shared amongst the various primary rights according to how much water there is in the creek. And if there's a need to share, then the water is shared on a pro rata basis according to the flow rate of the individual rights. And then that same pattern follows as you move into the second class rights and the surplus rights. And then finally, we understand that the Mill Creek distribution, I don't even want to say system, because that conveys that the state engineer has responsibility over this. We don't actively distribute water in Mill Creek, nor do we want to. You guys have done a fantastic job for many, many years, and our goal throughout all of this is to establish a structure so that you guys can continue to do that good job. And so we didn't want to get too laborious or too explicit on flow measurement, and so we've included a very general flow measurement statement. We know that there is a flow structure that exists at this general location at the mouth of the canyon, and if the need arises between the various water users, then you should have the tools you need to distribute water amongst yourselves. That's our hope. Okay, any questions on that structure? Okay. All right, the next thing I wanted to cover, and this is maybe one of the more confusing aspects of the proposed determination, is how we had to accommodate some of the unique awards in the Mill Creek Decree. So as you know, the 1913 Mill Creek Decree describes fractions of Mill Creek, of the flow of Mill Creek, and that it assigned these fractions to the separate ditches. And then these ditch awards are further subdivided into hourly awards. And as we worked through these hourly and these fractional awards, there were water rights that were no longer in use. And so we had to accommodate that. And then we also had to somehow accommodate this nature of fractional and hourly uses. And so that kind of presented our problem. How do we equitably describe these portions or of fractional or hourly awards? As we did that, the other goal and problem we wanted to solve was how do we avoid flow rate, or how to avoid flow rates. I think that's written wrong. We didn't want to avoid flow rates that were honored. We actually wanted to honor the flow rates that we wanted to honor the 1913 Mill Creek Decree. So I think I wrote that wrong. I apologize for that. Our intent was to try and honor that as closely as we could. And then overarching goal on all of this was we wanted to make sure that these flow rates were realistic. Did they correspond with what could actually be done out in the diversions that are actually out along the creek? And so that led to what we inserted into the preamble. And admittedly, this is, it's a bit of a mouthful. It's a bit bit hard to understand, and hopefully by walking you through that, that will help you understand this a little bit better. So let's just read that. So time-based interest, this is part 7 of the preamble. It says that some rights are described with a time-based interest in the flow rate, listed as the quantity of water. Where so described, the claimant is permitted to proportionately reduce the flow rate and increase the duration of the authorized diversion. For example, a right with a 1 CFS quantity of water and a time-based interest of 8/168 may divert 0.5 CFS for 16 1/68 of the time, which is twice the amount of time. This time-based variability can only be exercised when doing so will not interfere with senior rights. And so the concern here was, as we worked through the math of looking at the flow rates and what these hourly awards meant, it was clear to us that if we did a simple proration of the flow rate based on acres of irrigation, that it would leave some of these awards with too little flow to be useful. And so this is the way we try and accommodate that. The way that the Mill Creek decree was worded is you had a certain flow rate, but the way that it was limited is it was limited by time. For example, 10 hours of a given flow rate. And so we've brought that over into these awards to reflect that, but at the same time also gives flexibility as to how these flow rates would be administered. Now, are there any questions there? I do have one more slide that dives in just a little bit deeper and gives a little bit more information. Maybe I'll go into that now, and then I'll pause for a second for some questions. So the big question is, how does this time-based thing work? You will find in on some of the awards a comment like is listed under number 1, and it's another comment. It's at the end of the water right, and it describes how this water right is a primary right or a second class right or whatever it is, entitled to the listed flow rate on and then you'll see a fraction. Time-based interest award in award, and then it identifies the award and the paragraph in the 1913 decree. And so, as we kind of covered, for rights that are designated like that, the water user has a right to the full flow rate, but for a limited amount of time that is equal to that fraction of 8/168 or whatever the fraction says in the given award. Okay, and that's a fraction. So this time-based interest is flexible. Now, why did we make it flexible? Well, we think that making this flexible both supports the status quo. If it's the desire of the various water users to just leave things as they are, then they can continue as they are right now. However, if there is the possibility that if the water users come together, that this could support an updated water use timetable. There are various water rights that are no longer in use, and so there are likely periods of, the 1913 decree pretty much mapped out an entire week's worth of time between the various water users. There are a lot of those water rights that are no longer in use, and if it's the desire of the water users, it appears that there is the potential to remap and reorganize and come up with a new arrangement that might work more equitably amongst the various water users. We wanted to provide that flexibility. There's no need to seek the state engineer's permission for this flexibility. Again, we don't distribute water along Mill Creek, nor do we want to. We want this one to continue as it has, being a well-managed system. And so that's our desire, but we hope that what we've done here will accommodate that, either maintaining the status quo or supporting an updated water use timetable that would work with all of you. Now, I'll pause right here. Are there any questions about this time-based interest and how it works and what it means for you?
Michael, it's John Melville. So basically what you're saying is that you've put together a format for us that we could utilize if it was essential for each of us in this area, or we could actually adjust it based upon the needs as a group. But and we have, just so that you're aware, we have had a group meeting prior to this call. And I asked everybody to come in and sit on the call. I know Russ and a few others are on it. But the whole concept and the whole idea for us is, as you've laid it out, we certainly then can utilize your 1/68th time basis, or we can adjust it based upon needs as a group. Is that correct?
Certainly, yes, absolutely. That's the flexibility we wanted to provide you, while equitably describing the right, but providing the flexibility so it can go either way. It can support the status quo, or it can support a new look at things, because I certainly think there is the potential to look at things again.
So, Michael, how do we know what rights have been given up or are no longer in use so that we can do that reallocation?
Yeah. So the proposed determination has a section that lists all of those. Admittedly, it requires, putting together some tables to understand exactly where things, where the various rights went. If you'd like, we have various tables that we've put together, and I would be happy to provide them if it would help you. With their Excel, an engineer's best friend is an Excel spreadsheet, and but I always have trouble working with someone else's spreadsheet, and so there's a chance that it may just be way too much to handle, because it is a very complicated system. But if it helps, I'm happy to provide that, and if that would be a good tool for you. I've done the review myself to make sure that the proposed determination encompasses the entirety of the 1913 decree, and so I have that confidence that it's all there, and we'll address where the forfeited rights sit. But admittedly, it takes a little bit of work to extract it and make use of it.
So once the group comes together on the redistribution of those rights, do we then come back to this entity and say, here's the new allocation? No? We just manage it on our own.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're providing this flexibility. You don't need to seek our permission, as long as the rights are used within the constraints that we've defined here. Then there's no need. Now, the danger is, or not danger, but a risk is, if this upsets water users, that could potentially lead to disagreement. And when there's disagreement on a source, sometimes that leads to the state engineer stepping in and distributing. We don't want to do that. I don't see that there's any need. You guys seem to have a very good functioning group of people. But unless that disagreement rises up, we expect that you guys will just take care of it within the limits that are defined in the PD in this proposed determination.
Yeah, no, we certainly will do that, and thank you for your efforts in our behalf, number one. And then secondly, there was a question on during the time when this first came out. I know there were certain people that did miss the deadlines, then came back and said, hey, I missed the deadline for some reason. They have now been incorporated back into the group. And so would all of those that are on this flow, should they be all under one number? Because there are a few of them that have a different number than the entire group. Should they all be encompassed into the one group, or are you okay with having separate entities under this flow?
I guess I don't understand exactly what flow you'd be referring. I mean, there's a lot of different water rights. I mean,
right.
I mean, there's the Keller Ditch Award, there's the James Russell Award, there's, go down the list of all the various awards, and so they are spread amongst the very multiple different water rights.
Right. The one that we're referring to more so, and Russ, you can jump in if needed too, and I know that Theo, you're on there, and a few others, but this is the James Russell ditch. Okay. And I know that, like, for an example, my next door neighbor is on a different number than we are, Randy Hart. And it's like, should Randy be incorporated on the Russell Ditch to be uniform with the rest of us instead of having his own? I don't know if you can see that or not, but there, for some reason, he has a different number than the bigger group as a whole.
Okay, I'm not. Nick, do you happen to know? Can you
for
talk
sure.
to that?
And I can speak to that for sure. So when it comes to Randy Hart, and he is a unique case for sure, because of his abstracted title that he provided on that James Russell Ditch that tied it to a very specific award, whereas the rest of the James Russell Award is a general award based on connection to that original ditch system. And so houses that are pertinent to or the properties that are all actually still using that original James Russell Ditch. So I think it would be the expectation that he would be incorporated, and based on, you know, the flow system that you have already arranged, that he would fit into that in the same way. And I know that was definitely the goal in drawing up those recommendations, was that he would not be any different than any of the other users on that system.
No, thanks, Nick. And we have incorporated him into that group as well. So we haven't made it anything different, but it was just where he had a separate number. Didn't know if it should be a uniform number or not. But based upon what you're saying, we just incorporate him based upon that, and we go forward.
Yep.
I have a question. This is Annette Wilden, and I'm representing the Lower Mill Creek Irrigation Company. And you talk about a group of water users. We're not familiar with that group. Should we be part of that group?
And so it sounds like Mr. Melville and Hunsaker are referencing perhaps the group of water users associated with the James Russell Ditch.
That's what I was wondering.
So that's what they're working together.
Right.
You know, there certainly could be, and if there's the need to get a larger group together, then that's something that you could certainly do. Maybe you find, and I think from us looking at things at the history of water use on Mill Creek, it seemed like there was a kind of a division between some of the upper users and then some of the lower users, and so perhaps there isn't a need to bring everyone together, but you can still kind of keep that. That's kind of up to all of you to decide, and maybe things can continue just as they always were. And then if you see that there's something to be gained by mapping it and taking advantage of some of the flexibility that we've programmed in, then, you know, by all means, definitely get together and coordinate.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think what we found is, given how Mill Creek runs, it's probably reasonable to think that the upper and the lowers probably don't have too much of an effect on each other. That's at least not what I found. I didn't find that there was a big effect between that.
No, and I think you're correct there, Michael. I think because when the Russell Ditch runs through, it affects just some of the upper people, but the main flow going down to the lower is kind of in a different tributary anyway. So based upon that flow, nothing really changes, I think, for lower like Annette you were questioning.
And so my encouragement, since we're kind of really wanting to go hands off on this, is when or if there's disagreements, just, you know, come together as a group. I hope that we've got the structure to support a very open dialogue between the various water users, and while recognizing the equitable portions of all of these rights. You know, if you guys identify something that we seem to have missed, I would welcome the objection along those lines, and we'll work on it. We can consider it. We ultimately want to get this right. That's the primary objective. Okay, any more questions along those lines? I appreciate the good dialogue. That was fantastic. Okay. All right, so we'll move along, and you know, some of this will be pretty straightforward. You probably know a lot of this already. this is part of the proposed determination and location map, and you can see the boundary of this subdivision. It's got a very tight boundary right through once we get out of the canyon, and it's bounded on the north by 33rd South and on the south by 39th South, and it ends at 7th East. But then we follow Mill Creek up to the drainage divide, the separation between it and Big Cottonwood Creek to the south, and Parley's to the north. Okay, so after all of that initial information, you'll find the priority schedule. Now, this is an important section. If you as water users are going to come together and talk, this is probably going to be what you want to use as your reference. And what I mean by that is you'll see listed here the water source, which you're probably all most interested in, Mill Creek. And then it has the class, structure, and priority dates of all of the various water rights. So there's the class, and I'm not going to show all the pages of it, but if you were to advance into it on your copy, you would see the house use, the primary, the second class, and the surplus all laid out in order with all of the various water rights listed. So there's the priority date. It lists the flow rate. Now, in the case of a time-based interest right, this is the maximum flow rate that could be taken. If a water user chooses to exercise that flexibility, that delivered flow rate might reduce somewhat to match what time they're looking to get, or to what they're targeting. And then we have the water right number that's listed here, and then the owners of record. And certainly if you have questions and you want to talk about like the priority schedule in more detail, I do have a PDF of the PD and of the proposed determination, and I can bring that up and we can review that. But I'll just go ahead and carry on through. This is what a standard page of the proposed determination looks like. And so we're going to use the Keller Ditch Award as our example because it has a little bit of everything. And so you'll find the water right number listed here. You'll find the owners listed with their ownership interest described as well. And then this water right is spread across 3 different pages. So you're going to see that jump here in a minute. And so in the next page, you can see it's continued, and there are more users. And then you'll also see the type of right listed. It's a decree right. You'll find the quantity of water. And again, this is the maximum flow rate that can be diverted with the Keller Ditch Award. And then you'll find the priority date, the class, and then the source. And the source, of course, is Mill Creek. And then you'll find the point of diversion. And there are some rights listed in the Mill Creek proposed determination that are wells. And so if it's a well, you'll find some well data. But this one is a surface diversion, so that's not included here. And then you'll find what's another confusing aspect of water rights, and it's a water use group. Fortunately, this example is very simple. There's only one water use, and there is only one water right providing for it. You will occasionally find multiple water rights listed under a water use group. But we're not going to go into that. If you happen to have one of those water rights that have multiple water rights listed and you would like some help understanding that, we're happy to help you with that. But this being a simple case, a water use group represents a set of beneficial uses. And in this case, that beneficial use is irrigation. And we describe the period of use when you can use this water, and then what it can be used for. And we have 2 numbers here. One is a sole supply, and the other is a group total. In this case, those numbers match. Where we get more complicated group structures with multiple water rights, these can get a little complicated. Again, if you have questions on one, that if you have one of these where it is not straightforward like this, we're happy to help you understand it. And then you'll have the place of use described, the section, township, and range. And then you'll see beside the section, township, and range a matrix which describes the quarter sections where the irrigation is found. And then finally you'll see the total acreage in this place of use. And then jumping over to the third page, and it just, the killer ditch award just barely falls onto the second page or onto the third page. You'll see an example of the time-based interest wording that we talked about earlier. So in this case, the killer ditch award is limited to 8.89, this one's hard to say, 8.89168 time-based interest on award 3D in the Mill Creek Decree. Okay, so moving on, Ms. Translaker, you had a question about the forfeited rights. This is where you will find the listing of the forfeited rights. It looks like the page we pulled lists some underground water claims that were forfeited. And maybe at the end of this presentation, we can turn to the PD and I'll show you how to differentiate some of these underground water claims from rights that were in part of the Mill Creek Decree, but were forfeited. And you'll see an additional piece of text that identifies its paragraph and its association with the Mill Creek Decree. But remind me, and let's look at that at the end. But on all of the forfeited rights pages, you'll see the water right number listed, the owner of record, and the point of diversion and the source. And then there are also water rights listed that were found to be invalid, and similar kind of setup here. The water right number, the owner of record, and the point of diversion is listed. And then finally at the end, there's an alphabetic index, and this will just help you move through the various components of the proposed determination. You can search it by name or source or water right number. So hopefully that helps you get through that. So it's listed by name, source, water right number, and page number. All right, jumping over to the hydrographic survey maps, which accompany this proposed determination. And this is a general page from that. A little hard to go into too much detail on this. This is one that if you have questions, we can certainly help you understand this. But general sorts of things here is a north arrow scale and scale bar. The map legend. What you'll see here as you thumb through the various pages of the hydrographic survey map is you'll see those water use groups. You'll see polygons, which are these colored areas. And I think my mouse will work here. So these polygons, these colored areas, correspond to the water use groups that are color coded over here, and they're also identified on the map. And so that corresponds with those water use groups that are identified in the description of rights. Okay, and then finally, we have a little index map that will help you figure out where you are within the map set. Okay, so real quick, and we're approaching the end of this. As far as accessing the proposed determination, we sent notice of the proposed determination to all the water right owners listed on the records of the state engineer, all of the claimants who submitted claims to the Mill Creek adjudication, all of the registered agents, and for corporate entities owning water rights or having filed claims within the boundary, and all of the councils of record who have filed an appearance with the court. Now, as far as accessing it, the proposed determination can be found at the link listed here. You can find hard copies. They can be printed at our office for a fee. It's also been filed at the district court. And then the hydrographic survey maps can be accessed at this link. Excuse me. And hard copies can be viewed at our office as well. And so this is the point where we've kind of reached the end. And if you have questions, you can contact me at michaeldrake@utah.gov. Also Gary Brimley, his email address is garybrimley@utah.gov. And we're happy to take questions there. And I think I indicated that I would walk you through real quickly the forfeited rights section of the proposed determination and just show you how what it looks like for an award that was in the decree. And I'm not seeing it, Gary. Don't we list?
There's several of those that have the source that says Mill Creek right
Mill
there,
Creek, so
but
that-
I know what you're talking about, and that makes its appearance in the list of unclaimed rights.
I see. Okay, so the way in answer your question, Mr. Hunsaker, the way that you would identify what rights were forfeited is just identifying them by source, and that would be Mill Creek. And at least in this case, I'm not aware of a water right that was not based on the Mill Creek decree that would be listed here, meaning there's no later subsequent claims to Mill Creek that we identified. Is that correct, Nick? I'm not aware of any.
I can't think of any off the top of my head either. So
Okay, so it should be a pretty safe assumption that if the source is listed as Mill Creek, then it was a decree right that was forfeited. It's recommended to be forfeited in this proposed determination. Okay, so I'll bounce back here. Are there any additional questions? Any questions at the end here?
I don't think so, not from the upper James Russell side. So thank you for your due diligence and in helping us understand and getting the documents to us. So much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for all attending. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to end the recording. 3, 2,
Excuse
1.
me, I have a
Oh,
question.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, where would we find the recording of this presentation? Because I missed the
Okay.
beginning.
Yeah, so we will post it on our website. So, oh, Gary, remind me, where exactly do we post that?
There is a place where we announce public meetings. There's a web page that we have all of our public meetings compiled. So from our homepage,
I'm sharing right now, so I think this past meetings, is that? Yeah, that will be it.
that will be the place from our homepage under the banner where it says meetings and the flyout menu that says past meetings.
It will also be posted on, we have a YouTube channel, and so this recording will be posted on YouTube. Okay, any more questions? Thank you. That was a nice thing to get straight. Okay, I will go ahead and stop the recording then.